Howdy ho gamers, it's Luxon here, making Xeno content once again. And yes, I am following up a video about an even more niche JRPG series than Xeno with the Xenoblade X video, which is tantamount to shooting any potential channel growth from this month in the foot, but I don't care. The article I'm talking about is almost a month old, so this barely qualifies as Xeno news anymore, so I'm just gonna get through it. Spoilers for Xenoblade X, because this is a smattering of translations from various things in the art book by Lugubanda, the runner of xenomira.wordpress.com, a fantastic blog about tons of random obscure Xeno knowledge and translating a lot of things that have never been seen in English or have never been released in English into English so Western fans can actually learn about stuff. If you scroll through here, you'll see plenty of things that I have covered in videos before. This is where I've gotten most of my information, as well as plenty of things I haven't and don't intend to cover in videos. So if you want to learn some more Xeno things, then you should definitely give basically every article on this site a read through, especially talking about connections between Gears and Saga and Xenoblade. Today, however, we are just talking about this summary of various points from the Art of Mira Xenoblade X art book, because this did not get a translation. And unlike the Xenoblade 1 Monado Secret Files, which does have a full English translation done by fans, this one doesn't seem like a lot of people care about it, despite there being a lot of stuff in it. So this is just a smattering of points that Lugubanda found interesting, and not a full translation of the entire thing, because that is probably way more than one person can or should ever do. Unlike other videos where I've talked about stuff from Xenomira, I'm just going to do a read-through of the article on screen because I've read through it only once before, and just do this as a bit more informal just because I feel like doing it that way. And a lot of other times I've talked about articles, it was either the Siren model kit, which was a 40-minute video in and of itself, or part of a larger news roundup, whereas in this case we're just doing a short informal thing. So you could find scans of the entire book elsewhere. I don't really feel the need to go into that here. This is just going to only focus on the important stuff. So here is some Kunihiko Tanaka work of True Form Elma, and Soma, I never knew that. If you right-click, the little right-click menu never shows up when you're recording on Streamlabs OBS. Interesting. Anyway, the word Soma is the most important thing here, because Soma Bringer is a previous Monolith Soft game that was basically the beta version of Xenoblade 2, if what I've heard about it is correct. Story was by Soraya Saga, and I believe it's a DS game. I've played like the first 10 minutes of it on an emulator because there is a fan translation out there. I don't know if that has anything to do with this, but it's interesting. Apparently the back of Elma's head has a diaphragm-like organ on it, and it's supposed to reference crystals on her head and her memories. So crystals and memories, that seems like a concept, because this obviously isn't what final True Form Elma looks like. Maybe crystals containing memories is a concept that they were used for Xenoblade 2. Then here is another one, and the whole concept of her hair being fiber optics, that definitely carried over to the final version, so that's kind of interesting. It seems like that was a carryover from way earlier in development, when she looked like this, and did sort of have a core crystal looking thing. Then here, this looks more like a Clurian than Elma. I actually kind of like the antenna. I wish there was a character with that. And then this is, again, she has a core crystal in this version. Final Elma doesn't have that, so it's possible they reused the concept of the core crystal for Xenoblade 2, rather than us being able to look into something. Like, I kind of doubt the fact that, oh, Elma used to have a thing that looked like a core crystal on her. I doubt that means that Elma is a blade or something similar to a blade in the final canon version of X, but it's neat seeing that this could be where the concept of core crystals in 2 came from. Also, a funny Englishization of probably Cherub, the weird English names of the elements in Xenogears were also several very weirdly translated angel names, so it's nice seeing that continue in X, and this is all neat looking art, but of course, if you find the scans of the actual book, you don't really need me to show you that. Then, Rococo accessories, interesting, like the church, and Antimatter Maintainer. So this actually amplifies Elma's potential connection to the ghosts, because their vessels are powered on antimatter, and if her accessories are made of weird unknowable particles and antimatter maintainers, then that might mean that she also wears antimatter, which would make her a lot more similar to it. I also don't know what Rococo, and actually, I can know because I can open Wikipedia and see if that has anything to do with the church. Ornamental and theatrical, parts of Baroque. I mean, that looks like a religious thing. Yeah, that... Okay, that's a palace, not a actual, like, church or religious site. But, yeah, I could see... I don't know a lot about art movements, so I didn't know if that's specifically tied to the Catholic or any other church, but I guess it does. And then, this is interesting. Cauldros concept art. This obviously looks like the final Cauldros. Old Roth. Apparently, either the homeworld of the Rothians, because we don't know a lot about the backstory of the Rothians. We know that their planet was taken over by the Ganglion and Gijarg was forced to serve them and all that honor stuff, but we don't really know exactly where they originated from, so we don't know if they were living on their original home planet when the Ganglion beat them up and stuff, or if they'd moved to a different planet. So Old Roth could be the lost Jerusalem of the Rothians, or it could have just been where they were living before Gijarg went out into space. Then here we have just more Rothian architecture that we never really got to see, as well as a style for Federation Ganglion, which is interesting. That probably just means Samara Federation and the Ganglion being an offshoot of that, but there's also the fact that there was the, like, actual Federation of Earth, and there are different galactic federations in Xenogears and Xenosaga as well. And then this is basically... I'm guessing the original idea for the follow ball, or Tatsu's equivalent to the communicating devices, just the regular sci-fi comm devices that all the blades carry. But yeah, it looks like it's a lollipop thing. Napon having video chat was also a thing in 2, so this could be another reuse thing. But I guess the idea of Napon being able to Skype each other just was too high tech for them in X, and them being able to do that would have broken some story things, which I think that would have broken the short story about Tatsu and Tora's background that was given out pre-release, and I think has a translation out there somewhere. And then here are some ghost ships called God Ghosts. Yeah, these are Gnosis. These look even more like Gnosis than the ones that were in the game. And this one, fireball projectiles and releases thunder. That's interesting. Gnosis do have elemental abilities in Xenosaga. This looks a bit less like a Gnosis, a bit more abstract, like biblically accurate Gnosis, I guess. I don't really know, but it's kind of interesting, I guess. And again, massive amounts of design variety while still looking like they're from the same kind of thing. This is just hallmarks of the Gnosis. The ghosts are the most Gnosis-like thing in the Xenoblade series, and I made an entire video about stuff like that. Then here we have even more ghosts. I mean, I don't know what God Ghost really means. I'm guessing, okay, this is the biggest one. This could be their mothership. There's not really a size scale on here. So I could see this one being, like, massive, like the size of a small moon. And I believe this is the one from the opening cutscene, which is already massive compared to Earth. So this is probably even larger than that. But this is the thing from the opening cutscene. And it's just the warship ghost with a commander in it. So this is basically the field command of the ghosts. I'm guessing, alright, it was never explicitly stated anything about the ghosts really, not where they came from, not what their planet is, so maybe they don't have a planet, and they just all operate out of here or orbiting around the God Ghost. This could be just the homeland of their people, and there is a giant Gnosis that houses other Gnosis called the Cathedral Ship. Cathedrals are where you worship God, so that's another potential connection. And then this doesn't really explain a lot about it. This is basically just, yeah, it's a big ship, and wow, I can't believe the bridge where people command from is on the biggest ship. Then on here is an interesting looking skell, which is the Nilnail Skell, which is interesting. Very long needle, logic drive, directly references Xenosaga here, and this is just ideas of, oh, this is a previous design of the Nilnail, which is basically a super boss, but not really. It's in one of the challenge battles, but doesn't show up in the story, and was apparently supposed to be the skell of a Klurian, one of Celica's people named Nilnail, and I believe there's a discussion of concept art of her later on in this article. So this is just an early design of that when it was supposedly supposed to have more story relevance, and this is even more. It could potentially shed butterfly scales, which is interesting. I know there's the fight against them. There's Nilnail Albus and Falvus, I believe. I don't think any of them have butterfly-related things, I don't think the final design even has these wing-like things on them at all, but this is just kind of interesting. Then we move on to the super interesting stuff, because this was just random concepts of things that did end up in the game, besides, I guess, this, and that's not, like, massive story revelations or things about the original plot that was scrapped. The Unidentified Materials section is. This is about stuff that even the person narrating this section didn't know everything about, probably because a lot of the stuff in it was classified material that they didn't want to leak out because they might use it in future games, be it in X or in a future numbered Xenoblade title. So here we have the generic hero guy. He's a hero, protagonist, a young man in his late 20s, which, you know what? Good for you, Monolith. You actually referred to someone in their late 20s as young in an anime thing. As someone in his early 20s who already feels old, thank you for this. Although no name, they are referred to as a protagonist, and unlike the Avatar in Xenoblade X, they seem to have some kind of personality. In other words, this character is... Huh? I'm guessing the implication is this is the guy who was lost in Elma's tandem Skell in the battle over Earth. That's just the unnamed protagonist hero man. And was later replaced, I guess, with the actual Avatar of Cross, while still having a part in the backstory. This is all I could guess about that. I'm guessing that he wasn't supposed to have randomly disappeared in the original version of the game. I'm also guessing that he is the Black Knight. There's going to be more about the Black Knight later on. Then here is some interesting concept art. This is just dad. So presumably this was someone's dad. I'm not sure if it was Hero Man's dad, if it was her dad, or if it was just the dad of somebody else. But honestly, it looks like a lot of his design was repurposed into the big three of NLA, being Shosan, Nagi, and Vandam, just being older, father-like figures, and his expression here looks a lot like some later Nagi concept art, even though his hair, and I'm guessing his race, is different. Can't really tell what race this guy is, but his face structure looks a bit different than Nagi, so he might not be completely Asian like Nagi seems to be. And then Reina Sakuraba. This is the random unused X character that I think everybody knows about because she shares the name with one of the arms manufacturers. So presumably she was going to be connected to Sakuraba Industries in the actual game, not necessarily being part of it. I'm thinking of a certain Trails character who I don't actually like a whole lot, with a very similar role in the plot compared to a specific arms and technology manufacturer. That's the best analogy I could make, but we're not dwelling on that because she's a very horribly written character who doesn't get anything interesting in the entire 4-game called Steel series. But she seems like she might have been potentially this guy's love interest. Don't really know about that, but I think this is the one where the most people knew that she existed at basically everything in here. Besides the Black Knight, of course, because he's like actually in the game. He's wielding a katana, he's in black armor. This concept art is unlike all the other characters we've seen. Ooh, we have totally seen these legs in a cutscene in Xenoblade X, and the funny thing is, the actual Black Knight used in-game just uses modified versions of actual gear Cross can wear, so this whole line about the strange, unusual appearance unlike any other characters is complete BS in the actual game, because you can more or less completely dress like him, and I'm going as far as to actually use gendered pronouns for this character, because I'm pretty sure that the Black Knight is actually this guy, because he shows up with Lao, who's seemingly alive after dying, obviously, on screen, and the hero guy, Elma's friend, was presumed dead, and there is precedent for people wearing full body coverings coming back from the dead, or being revealed to be people having come back from the dead in previous Xeno games, so I'm pretty sure that's what that's supposed to be, and this was the Black Knight. The end of X is basically the Black Knight recruiting Lao to be another one of those beings. There are some sources that erroneously claim that Lao has returned to his flesh and blood body after coming back. There is nothing to confirm or deny this at all. It could be a mimeosome, it could be his body. He could not have a physical form at all and just be the corporeal, that's just how we view his spirit or something. We don't know, we'll need a sequel to figure this out. And then here is the actual character of Neil now. This is the only other character that seems to explicitly be of Celica's race besides the actual Celica concept art. This alien character shares the same name as a Skell in a certain mission. In the description, they're identified as Clue, the same species as Celica. So, presumably Celica's species was going to have a bigger role in an earlier version of the plot, which makes sense because Luxar mentions that the barrier around the Lifehold is not something seen outside of the Clue system. And again, since skells and all that came from Elma's technology, it's implied that Elma might also hail from that system, despite the fact that she doesn't look anything like Celica besides the pointed ears, and the fact that her and Celica don't seem to recognize each other's species whatsoever. So this character seems to have been the same species as Celica from the beginning, which is interesting because going back up here, none of the Elma concept art resembles Celica at all, so she could either be an advanced form of that race or a different race from that system entirely, or just someone who happens to have access to technology from where Celica is without necessarily being from there whatsoever. Then there's just Emily, concept art of the president's daughter. Speaking of the president, there's the presidential aide and former defense minister Maurice. Any connections there? So Maurice, I don't know if this info that he used to be a presidential aide or minister for defense, which, I mean, I get that he's American, but you're kind of mixing your... this is just probably Japan not knowing exactly how the American government works, and honestly, good on you. I'm glad you don't have to deal with us on a regular basis. But the U.S., for those of you who don't know, doesn't really have a position of ministers. I'm guessing this was like... He would probably be the Secretary of Defense, which is Nagi's actual position when Maurice basically becomes the de facto president of whatever's left of the U.S. New Los Angeles. But I think this little bit of lore that Maurice used to be an aide to presumably the last president of the United States, I think this is knowledge that was not existent anywhere else in other material that X, which is really interesting. So Emily is the president's daughter. Presumably Maurice would have met her at some point if he was an aide to the same president that she is the daughter of. Now, we do know that Mira was named after a woman who chose to die with Earth, who Maurice loved. I'm hoping it wasn't her because Maurice is like 60-something and she looks to be a teenager. So I'm assuming that Mira and Emily are different characters. She just also happens to have a connection to Maurice because they were connected to the president at some point. And then here we have Veltal. I mean, that's basically Veltal, which is an interesting version, pre-existing concept art of the Ares Skell. And I like this note from Lugabanda. Everything is being translated. If it says redacted, it's literally blacked out on the page, which is super interesting that this doesn't seem to be a diegetic in-universe military document that would be redacted. This just seems to be Monolith not giving away all the secrets because there's apparently still stories to tell. So this is concept for a Skell called Ares. The overall silhouette looks the same as the Ares in X, but it looks much more biological with glowing exhausts. This is very Xenogears-y. Xenogears has a lot more biomechanical mechs in it. And it's using technology not found in Earth-made Skells, which is again very interesting because all the technology from Earth-made Skells came from Elma in the first place. So I guess maybe the Ares was harder to make using the technological capabilities and natural resources of the Earth, so only a couple were able to be made, and that's why the Earth-made Skells are distinctively Earth-made despite using alien technology. Like, you could tell an Earth Skell from a Skell from another race. It is unclear what burned form means, but maybe it means additional armor and weaponry. I don't know. There are mechs in previous Xeno games with super modes. It grows 2 additional redacted on its shoulders. The binder-like thing close to its armpit can be collapsed. The already existing redacted have their intake wide open continuously. Now, I don't know what that means. Redacted could mean it's using terminology from another Xeno game that they might not have copyright or something to use, but clearly this just means these little weapon funnely things, and it looks like it has these energy cores on it, and you can clearly see in this mode they're in a different state than they are in this mode, so it looks like that's what they're referring to, and it's possible that that core is something relating to a previous Xeno game. So that could be the slave generators, which power the gears in Xenogears, or it could be something else like Aerods, or something connected to the ES units in Xenosaga. And then, considering the overall silhouette, I want to grow some redacted on its hips too, but it might be impossible because the front arms get in the way of it. This seems to be like actual mech designer speak talking about things, but it's still really interesting that whatever these cores are is something that's redacted even by the developers. Thinking of something bigger and more spiky, could get longer limbs considering redacted. So this seems to be the fact that the mech can transform itself, which is another thing that happens a lot. Black parts are leather. Kydex, can't tell if it's a dumped concept or just taking from an actual existing brand because Kydex exists in Japan. So this could be a note just referring to, hey, this is something similar to something that exists in the real world that someone from Japan might be familiar with, or this is just a fictional brand. And it's just interesting that there's leather on this mech, which is, I mean, you can see it. There's a lot of black stuff that doesn't look as metallic, but that's something that's never existed in a Xeno game before. You've had biomechanical robots, but you've never really had a robot wearing clothes or something. So it's possible that this robot wearing clothes could actually be, like, connected directly to its human in some way. And leather isn't used for defensive purposes. Ooh. This is interesting. Redacted. So these cores are something redacted with cells. They're alive. This Ares concept could be powered by ghosts themselves, or some other kind of existence. Also, that's a mech with an eye patch. That makes me think Brigadier, which makes me think about Bartholomew Fatima, and that's something I like a lot. And then intake on its head wide open, crack in its eye is bigger, so an eye patch is used to patch things up. So it looks like some of this is just Choco actually just talking design work, which is just like, hey, this is my thought process for designing things. You might not be able to put these little hip things on because it would clash with the arms, and part of it is also just straight up saying, yeah, this Ares is powered by some sort of living thing that's kept in check by the leather, which is really interesting. And then here is the cockpit for that Ares, as well as some other concepts for how the little drone things work. In the description, it says that there was a former pilot for this mech, so that means someone else used to pilot it. Pointing at the blue male figure's hands, likely lone hero. Virtual console, the thing CEO Redacted is using in his lab. That's really interesting, because there are no real CEOs that we meet in Xenoblade X. Sure, the arms manufacturers have CEOs, but most of the ones we meet are just companies that are immediately formed. Like Professor B's workshop, Professor B and his one assistant are basically the only employees. Candid Incredible, we see it formed by various Manon. The only real arms manufacturers who we don't meet the CEOs of are basically the biggest ones, the ones that were massive corporations on Earth before all this went down, and we don't see their CEOs. So it's potentially, okay, Lone Hero is using some sort of virtual console. The same thing the CEO Redacted is using in his lab. Does that mean that Lone Hero is the CEO? Because weirdly young-looking CEOs are a thing in Xeno. Or is it the fact that the CEO used to be a different character? Perhaps the CEO is the CEO of Sakuraba and the father of Reina. It's very likely that this concept of a tandem Ares skull is what carried over to Elma and the Lone Hero, piloting that in defense of Earth, with the Lone Hero being lost and Elma being the sole survivor. And that's probably why all the future Ares... it's not elaborated on exactly what happened, but the lyrics of the song In the Forest sort of explain that he jumped out of the skull or got ejected from it somehow. And it's likely that his loss is what led to the Ares, the Prog Ares, and the pilotable Ares in X being only single cockpit. Looking at the cockpit from the outside, it's spherical. Upper part of the sphere is dome-like. The space below the diameter is where the original pilot resided, and the space above has a frame made from Earth tech. Without this, there's nothing you can really grab onto in this space. The hatch opens, both the ring and monitor decline also. And again, obviously Elma. Redacted when combined. Do they operate skulls in a bike seat position? There's no depth in the seating, so they can't sit very close to Redacted. So Redacted in this case might not mean the same thing as the core is here. It could just be the name of Lone Hero, which makes sense because the CEO's name is also redacted and Elma's name is never directly mentioned. So it seems like this is just talk for, okay, how are they actually seated in this cockpit? And it seems to be they can't be super close to each other, which might also help to explain why Elma wasn't able to save Hero Man. In the new transformation sequence, third part of the transformation, binders collapse in helical fashion, open. The redacted enclosed inside are specific parts that haven't detached from a cocoon-like blob. And the butterfly wings, we have the butterfly wings on the mech again, so it's possible that this version of the Ares is connected to the old butterfly wing version of Nail, and the more insect-like appearances for these versions of Elma. All seems connected, again giving Elma some sort of Clurian connection, which is weird, again, because she doesn't look like Celica or Nail. So we have two Clurians who look the same, and one person connected to Clue who doesn't look at all like them at all. And coming back down here, this is just a transformation sequence we never really got to see, because the only real big transformation sequence in the actual game is the Vita. Here we have some other skells. These look like... oh, it's the Black Knight's mech. I forgot about this. Concept art for an unknown mech that can go between human form and cruise form for flight. I mean, you're not special. All skells can transform into vehicle modes. This one just happens to be a flying vehicle. It's categorized as a skell, but seems to be made from technology much more advanced than Earth's. that shouldn't really keep it from being categorized as a skell, unless this is an early version of the concept of skells in the first place, because in the game, the Earthlings refer to basically any mech as a skell. I believe even the Vita is referred to as one. Then here we've got a colorized version of this same skell. I think it's the exact same design with, I guess, okay, no, wings are a little different because they still show up here in the humanoid mode while they're only folded out here in the flight mode before. And it's interesting, right arm and katana are Rothian. So as you can see, these do not match the rest of the skell. The right arm doesn't match to the left, and the katana very obviously looks like something you'd see on a Rothian skell. So it seems like the Black Knight, who for some reason has a white mech, is having to basically ship of Theseus his mech together as it keeps getting destroyed. It is also worth noting that it has these little protrusions that look sort of similar to the Ares tires on the completed version of the Ares. That is just straight up the back of the space shuttle, which I don't think has to do with anything. Same color though. And this is a very Ares-looking mech in general, so it's possible that the Black Knight skell is sort of inspired by the general Ares design, especially because we see these blue glowing nodes, which showed up on the Ares design in a lot of the same places. Doesn't really have a chest one, but it has, oh no, it does. I guess it's more of a stomach one than a chest thing like a core crystal would be. But again, also pilot shown in blue here, explicitly confirmed to be the Black Knight. Lone hero shown in blue here, very likely that he's what the Black Knight actually is. And again, the fact that the accessories are things like fangs from space creatures seems to imply that the pilot of this mech had to fight space creatures. Like, we know that Telethia exists. Well, I know. We know that Igroliths, like Pharsis, exist elsewhere in the universe. So we know space creatures exist in this universe. And if the Igroliths are the big ones, then there's got to be smaller ones and stuff too that are more likely that one of these things could take it out. Also, the Black Knight seems uber powerful. But anyway, this line implies that the pilot of this mech had to fight space creatures and presumably got the mech damaged and had to pick up a new weapon and right arm from a Rothian skell on the way to Mira. So again, it seems pretty likely that after getting ejected from the tandem Ares, potentially maliciously by Elma, Lone Hero Man got his own skell somehow. He might have died and constituted it using his powers, and then had a long, grueling, seemingly permanently transformative of his mech trip to Mira, either to come and help humanity or for revenge. Then here we've got something sort of resembling the Yggdrasil airship from Xenogears. This one's called the Dreadnought, a warship with a flight form and a land cruiser form. Judging from the name and its appearance, it seems to be Earth-made, but its purpose is not known. The mothership the protagonist boards might be a good guess. So it seems like the original concept for the White Whale was much more of an explicit military vessel, and the protagonist would be going on this and I guess doing more fighting in space against things, or just, because the thing is, X's story is already about being in the military. Like, that's just what Blade is. It's what's left of the World Coalition government / US military that made it to Mira within LA. It just seems like the entire ship was going to military and not have civilians in the original planning, because you can't even see a city on here. Then here, this looks like the bridge of the Dreadnought. Yep, looks like it was used being Earth technology, and with an Ares adjustment tank, which seems like it was a storage and basically maintenance pod, which we've seen stuff like that for other Xenomechs in the past. And, okay, this is interesting. Air Force One exists. So this is the space version of Air Force One, which is only interesting because this again ties to the President of the United States, who the previous note about Maurice implies used to be a more important character, or at least have some lore connected to Maurice and the character of Emily. So the fact that there's concepts for Air Force One, and apparently it even had the USAF logo on it here, yeah, you can see the little symbol there too, seems to imply that more of the US government was going to make it to Mira in some way. And this is interesting because the New Tokyo concepts are later down in this very article. Like, there were concepts for New Tokyo in the same file as the concepts for Air Force One, so I'm not sure when they chose to change the setting from Japan to the US. But the whole Air Force One thing seems to imply that either NLA was not the first American city to be taken, or the president was going to be on NLA for whatever reason. So, obviously, Air Force One was nowhere to be seen in NLA. The president clearly isn't there, because Shosan obviously was never the president, or he'd be using that as part of his rhetoric. They're clearly hinting at either New DC, New New York, or New some other American city that the president happened to be at whenever the ARC ships went up. Or the fact, there's also no scale on here. This might be a window, but it might just be paneling or something, so we're not sure. This could be ARC ship size in and of itself. We don't know. Air Force One could be like a mobile spacebound version of the like giant nuclear bunker where whatever's left of the US government is supposed to go in case of like drastic government apocalypses. So I'm guessing that's why we haven't really had any like members of Congress or governors or anything in NLA, despite it being like a prominent city in California. There's no like big American politicians. Shosan was a presidential aide, presumably he was also Secretary of Defense or Secretary of War or some cabinet position or something based on the minister note. But the fact that he's the only big politician seems to imply that, yeah, a lot of the government ended up somewhere else, either on different ARC ships that did or didn't make it off the planet, did or didn't make it to elsewhere on Mira, or they just all happened to be in the same place. And then here's where it gets really interesting, because I love this picture of Mira, just in general. The whole patchwork planet, different stuff here. Here it looks to be all the continents that you actually get to explore. That looks like NLA, and we'll see some really interesting stuff. Entirety of Mira. You can see NLA towards the bottom left. If the surrounding area are the continents in Xenoblade X, it seems that Mira has many more continents. Also at the pole, we see a giant tower-looking structure. So, the characters on Mira don't explore a lot of Mira. They explore 5 continents. Yeah, they're all called continents, and this planet only has 7, arguably many less depending on who you're talking to, but clearly we don't get to see the entire planet. If we were exploring the entire planet, we could go off the east edge of the map and find ourselves on the west edge of the map. Plenty of JRPG overworlds where you cover the entire planet can do that. But you don't do that in X. There's a bounded box that doesn't loop in and of itself, so clearly that's not the entire planet. And obviously the fact that there's these big cracks and it looks like the different tectonic plates or whatever are splitting apart, that's weird. That makes it look like a patchwork planet of sorts. But that's not necessarily in the final game. That's not necessarily why you don't go to other locations. But like, okay, this is Mira. This is clearly Primordia. This could be Oblivia because it looks a little brown too. This looks like a weird Sylvalum that goes up to the North Pole, but as you can see, there's a crack here, so it doesn't look like you'd be able to get to this Sylvalum. Like, this could be part of Noctilum, this could be Cauldros. Clearly, these aren't the final designs of any of the continents, but this is NLA. But you can also see there's another city here. There's a weird dark aurora down here. There's whatever this is. This could be a third city. This looks to be some of the structures in Cauldros based on that and some Sylvalum-like stuff, but this looks like a piece of a moon with a giant crater with a tower in it. I don't know what this means, but this looks wildly different from any of the cities. This looks like it's different from NLA. It's different from the new Tokyo concepts. It's different from anything we think the Earth would be capable of. But it's also different from any of the other stuff we see on Mira from the ancient civilization in Cauldros. So it seems to me like this original Mira concept is, you can see the land literally fading away, a patchwork of different planets. And I'm going to get back to this once we go through the other Mira things. Yeah, there we go. So there's this weird satellite thing called the Rose Garden, an artificial object residing within the planet's satellite orbit, which is interesting because you can't get back to satellite orbit on Mira. That's just not a thing you're capable of doing in the finished Xenoblade X. Really, really interesting. The Ganglion have like a suborbital thing, but that's just Luxar's Zern. You can fight that as a super boss. It's not actually that high up. So the fact that there is a thing in orbit in general is really, really interesting. The fact that it's called the Rose Garden has a very cultivating sense to it. And again, this isn't a Ganglion ship. This is something else. It's also not a ghost ship because it doesn't look like them. Could be the rest of Samar, but who knows? Rose Garden is a very interesting name. Also, this is the Rose Garden. This is something else. Some very Xenosaga-y designs in here too. Then there's this. Mysterious structure. There's nothing to compare it with, so the scale is hard to make out, but it seems to be a massive structure. What you can see toward the back seem to be stairs and something like an altar. So this seems to more be the precursor of Luxar's command room that we see in a few cutscenes of the game. because there's the altar there. That's where the Vita is stored. This is a lot less interesting than whatever the Rose Garden is, because this just seems to have evolved into the room Luxar gives all his speeches in. And then there's this futuristic-looking thing. Clue Connector Elevator. More clue info. Several concept art for a planet with the same name as the one Celica is from have been found. Below the connector elevator, there seems to be a town on the surface. The other arcs say bridge, so would this be a concept for a Chlorian spaceship? Who knows? And then this is Merci, or Merci, village, potentially. Super interesting. We know Celica came from a village that was besieged by the Ganglion and she was saved by Rock. So, would this be based on a Chlorian spaceship that would have also come to Mira? Is this just ideas for the planet Clue? If this contains pieces of old Roth, would it also contain pieces of Clue? Who knows? And then here, another interesting thing. Some very ornate, very Zanza looking designs, if I do say so myself. Like, this is just if they made a room out of Zanza's outfit. Chlorian Ship Bridge. Very interesting that this has all these weird ornate natural looking designs. We know Celica's people are somewhat in tune with nature, and it all looks like Zanza. Clue seems to sort of have been the Bionis of planets, if that makes any sense. Then here's New Tokyo, which is kind of less interesting, because like, yep, Japan made a Japan. And then I like this little Ares concept used to mark scale little people. This is just new Akihabara. It's not really a big deal. Then also the Sakuraba residence, which is interesting. Obviously, New Tokyo is going to have new versions of all the districts in original Tokyo, so the fact that there's an Akihabara and a thing calling itself Tokyo isn't interesting. But the fact that they had a concept for basically the mansion that the Sakurabas would live in. Obviously, Reina was supposed to be a character. I'm guessing the CEO was either her father or whatever family member was the CEO of Sakuraba Industries. But the fact that they just have this conceptualized, and it seems like this is a fairly, at least for the outside, you could probably just take this one thing and make a workable map that you could move your character around out of. It just seems like at some point they got fairly far into conceptualizing Tokyo. We can all assume from the name that New Tokyo is similar to NLA. However, as we know, there is no city called New Tokyo in Xenoblade X. What does this concept art mean then? I don't know. Maybe it has something to do with one of the other two glowing cities on this planet. Just a hunch. Then here is a new Policey Skell that I guess could just straight up transform into a police car, which, okay. New Tokyo Skells. That's why the existing more police-like Skell in X doesn't look like this, because it's, I mean, it's not, doesn't look a lot like an American anything, but this obviously is a much more Japanese aesthetic than the stuff there. Then this is an interesting thing, because this looks like Dagon or Rock concept art. This could be what Rock would look like, or people of Rock species would look like if they were wearing armor to fight. Gower Soldier, giant organism in a suit of armor. Gaps in the armor seem to suggest someone like Rock inside. Exactly. I forgot most of this text and I'm already remembering this stuff, so this is presumably what Rock would look like if he was doing his Ganglion Destroyer thing. And presumably we were supposed to fight more of Rock's people. Also, I don't remember if the Japanese name of Gower Plain is actually Gower Plain, but naming a race in X Gower would be really interesting if it was. Then this looks redacted. Ghost, large redacted. Light concept, human form front. Interesting. And there's more descriptions of this ghost thing here. Describing the core of the ghost in the left object. Like how a bioluminescent jellyfish has specks of light that course through, there is light coming from the redacted. Interesting. This redacted. That's the same thing on the Ares concept. It's very clear that whatever's powering that old Ares concept is the thing powering this ghost. Similar to the back of the base form Ares has redacted, there are redacteds burning like a slow burning fire. Sometimes they go zap like plasma. This is referencing something that actually did make it into the final game, because the final Ares, which I guess is the base form Ares, and the tandem version was some ascended state, it has energy wings instead of engines that help it fly. Super interesting, again, based on this ghost. Ghost, compilation of enemy designs. They have many forms, but they look similar to the organic weapons that shot down the white whale in the opening cutscene. So these are some more ghost designs, but the light concept of redacted human form. There is clearly a character, a transforming ghost-like character, that had use of these energy cores, could take on a more humanoid form and presumably had a different form. This also looks a lot like, this gives me Zenza vibes, but I don't think this was supposed to be Zenza or something related to him. Just because. And then here we have Devil L. Redacted, yet the front color for the text shows through the redaction very slightly, revealing it to say L's original form. Obviously this was intentional, although I'm pretty sure a lot of people would be able to make the L connection anyway. A very strange looking alien. No alien, whether they be within the ranks of Ganglion or the ones you befriend in LLA, look like this. The alien for the concept art on the left page, this one, looks sort of like the Machina from Xenoblade, but the one on the right page doesn't look anything like. This is a super cool design. I mean, Metal Face has the weird spine thing too, but this is clearly not a Xenoblade 1 reference. This is also really cool looking, obviously. The fact that the word before original form is redacted is also really interesting. So yeah, obviously this is another very known about thing. Probably the only thing known way more than Reina Sakuraba is that L used to have a more demonic form. These seem to be different concepts for just him, but it's very possible that these were supposed to be other members of his species. So L being some sort of demonic or more powerful entity who's just feigning ignorance, or because his name derived from Lucifer, possibly lost his powers and potentially his memory, because again we don't see any other of him out there, is a very common fan theory. And that's all of it. So, all of this together, I think we can sort of gather a little bit more about what Mira actually is. People have theorized Mira is Purgatory. I think that Mira is Battleworld. If you don't know, Marvel Comics had two different events called Secret Wars the second one was more recent based on the first one. They involved Doctor Doom doing things. I don't know. I'm guessing one of them is going to be adapted at some point in the MCU because if they're bringing the Fantastic Four in, they're going to have to bring Doctor Doom in at some point. Anyway, the point is that doesn't matter. Only the concept of Battleworld does. Which is basically one world, which is a patchwork of different planets from different universes. That's very interesting because we've got a lot of different Xeno concepts. We've got things from Gears and Saga in here, and we've got, obviously, the Chlorian stuff brings a lot of Zenza vibes, and L's one form looks like a Machina. So, X, I'm guessing that this, whatever Mira is a combination of lost worlds from across the Xeno multiverse. If Kaldros is really a segment of Old Roth, then that makes a whole lot of things make sense. Obviously, certain areas look like other areas from other Xeno games, but something like Sylvalum, there's nothing like it in any other game. The closest thing to it is Leftheria from Xenoblade 2, and that basically just keeps the white sand aesthetic and nothing else. Primordia and Noctilum and Oblivia, I guess, are fairly generic, but Oblivia has those giant ring structures that look sort of like the remains of the Mechanis, which are seen nowhere else on Mira. And the fact that real biomes don't change remotely as drastically as the ones on Mira do. Obviously that could just be a gameplay thing, but I think that every different continent on Mira is a piece of a different world. The ruins on Kaldros are completely different from the ruins in Oblivia, and while yes, there are some similar species across the entire planet, I think that the land itself comes from a lot of different places. That would explain the random appearance of Napon. That would explain why the Zarubagans, a race that was enslaved by the Ganglion, it would explain why the Samarians came from somewhere else and seemed to exist at the beginning of the universe but look like modern humans, and humans also evolved. It's very possible that ex-Earth humans aren't actually descended from the original Samarians, but that the original Samarians went into the X universe, being humans from somewhere else, came into the Xenoblade X universe from another universe, and humans happened to evolve independently, and just because those old guys were just normal Earth humans from a different universe, then the whole human DNA thing still works. I'm guessing that Mira is a patchwork of salvaged pieces of destroyed planets from, if not across one universe, from across multiple. And that is, this tower could be some sort of multiversal tuning fork thing. I want to say Crystal Tower in the first and Shadowbringers, but I don't want to go too deep into that rabbit hole, making more connections there. But what I think is, Mira is the end of all Xeno. This is the end state for any Xeno universe. A lot of Xeno games talk about the end of the universe. Xenosaga ends, minor spoilers, with the characters trying to stop the heat death of the universe after they stopped the main villain and like end of the actual plot of Xenosaga. Xenogears Episode 6, a game set seemingly soon after Episode 5, or the published Xenogears, was also considered to deal with the end of the universe. Future Connected deals with existential threats to the universe after Xenoblade 1. And Xenoblade 2 gets really existential with the existence of countless universes being talked about. I think, especially if Xenoblade 3 is real, we could see Mira in an interesting way, because it seems like dying civilizations find their way to Mira no matter what. Even the Telethia is a dying race if Future Connected is to be taken into consideration. So it's my guess that somehow, someway, by some power, be it the Zohar, be it something we've never even seen, but has precedent in other elements of Xeno. Again, Xenoblade 2 confirms the multiverse. Developer statements afterwards confirm that X is part of it. I'm starting to think that, basically, when the universe ends, some part of it will find its way to Mira. And when a race is at risk of going extinct, it too will find its way to Mira. And that leaves a lot of things unanswered, and a lot of things that could very easily be explored. And again, L. Is he a benevolent curator? Is his race the thing that oversees the Rose Garden? Because this piece, this is straight, this like is directly pulled from the final dungeon of Xenosaga 1. This pod looks familiar to a lot of things. And this is basically a Xenosaga ship in all but name. So that's interesting. Is the Rose Garden just some ship in orbit around Mira that we never saw? A remnant from a different universe, a remnant from a different lost race? Or is there an actual people there? Are there people overseeing? Are they from another dimension? Are they something like other universal entities from Xenosaga? Are there wave existences living up here? Is there a Zohar stored up here, and that's what's keeping Mira held together? Maybe there's a Zohar in orbit, transmitting to the tower. This tower could go through the center of the planet, and is holding the different chunks together, or growing the planet as fragments from other universes come in? I don't know. But the fact that New Tokyo is probably on either Moon Continent or weird Yellow Continent next to probably Old Caldros. I'm guessing that the Volcano Continent was eventually moved over to this part of Mira. It's very possible for there to be a spiritual successor to X that bills itself as not connected to the original game, but also, actually, this is kind of the original Primordia design. Obviously, this is NLA in a different Plains continent, but this is fairly similar in shape to Final Primordia. Doesn't really matter. Not relevant to what I'm talking about. And the thing is, there's these rifts. I could easily see the characters after X trying to explore more of Mira, but if the planet in the canon version of the game looks like this one, then they're probably not able to cross whatever this is. This purple energy, it looks a lot like the dark matter that we've seen powering different things like the Vita and the Ghosts, but it could be something else. I mean, yeah, dark matter powering the Vita, that makes sense. Ghosts are powered by antimatter, and they have those weird cores that are seemingly alive that powered the original Ares and all that stuff. Is this a third thing? Is this another thing? Are any of these connected? This look of land falling away into cubes and pillars of light seems to be like here or somewhere on the border of one of these cracks. So I'm guessing that these are very dangerous and can't be crossed easily. So that might be another thing, connecting all these different patches that make up Mira, uniting everybody and either saving all of the universes or I don't know. It's very possible that these pieces of planets weren't supposed to come together at all, and people were supposed to survive and do their own thing differently, and that whoever's in the Rose Garden, or the Clurians even, or someone else has malicious intent and is keeping people there intentionally. In which case, this humanoid ghost, or whoever this person that could take on this form, again, this could be Elma, is doing something maliciously, or L is doing something maliciously. I don't know, but this info gives us a springboard to think about a lot of different things that we've never thought about before, and I, for one, am very interested and might make more videos on stuff like this in the future. But this was a long and rambly video, so until next time, this is Luxon, signing off.